Welcome to this episode of our program, Daily Debate. As usual, we will be speaking about an important debate, an important file. Today we'll be speaking about Egypt-Africa relations. And Egypt has been putting Africa in the forefront of its priorities, particularly in the past few years, where Africa took a center stage of Egypt's, or for Egypt's as a prior file. Egypt was always keen in achieving the economic integration, laying the foundation of comprehensive sustainable development for all Africa at large, and has been on reinforcing its pivotal role in through strengthening trade, investment relations with all countries, in addition to transferring modern technology among the African countries. The president himself said that Egypt seeks to crystallize a joint African vision that accelerates the sustainable development goals and the climate action, as well as boosting the Africa cooperation in partnership with regional and international partners. We'll be speaking about that topic in our episode tonight. Before we delve into our discussion, let me take the top story of the day. And President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi inspected the military academy this dawn, where he was accompanied by Lieutenant General Mohamed, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, and the Minister of Defense and Military Production. Lieutenant General Osama Askar, Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, and a number of senior commanders of the armed forces. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Radi said that the President watched the students of the college during their implementation to a number of activities and exercises they do on a daily basis at the headquarters of the military college, which contribute to maintaining their physical fitness rates at their highest levels. The President also witnessed a number of activities related to the military rehabilitation of students according to the latest advanced preparations and qualification systems, which showed the extent of the self-confidence and level of discipline enjoyed by the new students during the military preparations period. The President praised the high level of preparation of the new students, and urged them to maintain their physical fitness and mental readiness, and to keep by heart the noble military values that has always characterized the Egyptian armed forces. The head of state also conducted an open dialogue with the new students on a number of issues and topics that revolve locally and regionally, reviewing the efforts made by the Egyptian state in various fields so that they can correctly assess the situation based on true sound knowledge. The President also met with a number of families and parents of the new students during their visit to their children, and saluted them for the effort they bear in raising children on principles and values rooted in patriotism. Welcome back, and back to our top story, back to our topic of the day. And before we delve into our discussion, let's first have this quick report. Egypt's work side by side with African countries to achieve sustainable development. That's President Sisi during Africa Day. Let's watch.
On the occasion of Africa Day 2022, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said that Egypt will continue to endeavor side by side with its sister African countries to achieve sustainable development. Africa Day marks the founding of the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, on 25th of May 1963, with Egypt a founding member. The OAU later evolved on the 9th of July 2002 into the African Union AU, which is made up of 55 member states that represent all the countries on the continent. President el-Sisi described the occasion as a great historical moment that established a new era in strengthening unity and cooperation between the countries of the continent. The head of state said that Egypt will continue working side by side with its sister African countries to achieve sustainable development and boost joint efforts to find solutions to problems and conflicts that the continent has suffered from for decades and have prevented the realization of the dreams of its people. The president said that we are taking firm steps towards creating a stable continent that guarantees a decent life for its people and instills a culture of civility, tolerance and love for the whole world. In recent years, the government has placed a priority on cooperation with its African sisters on the political, economic and social levels. In November 2021, the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics CAPMAS stated that the total value of Egyptian exports to the AU hit $3.9 billion during the first 9 months of 2021, compared to only $2.8 billion during the same period last year. CAPMAS further noted that Egypt's exports to AU countries in general witnessed a 37.8% hike during the same period. In the same month, Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli announced that Egypt is aiming to boost trade exchange with African countries, stressing that regional cooperation between trade blocs is a crucial mechanism for achieving development. Egypt is a signatory to several trade agreements among African countries, including the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA, an agreement that was adopted and opened for signature in March 2018 in Kigali, before going into force in January 2021 after months of delays owing to the pandemic. The AFCFTA aims to accelerating intra-African trade and boost Africa's trading position in the global market by strengthening its common voice and policy space in global trade negotiations. Furthermore, the AFCFTA will be the largest free trade area since the formation of the World Trade Organization, the WTO, given Africa's current population of 1.2 billion people, which is expected to grow to 2.5 billion by the year 2050. Meanwhile, Egypt has vowed to speak for African concerns at the 2022 UN Climate Change Conference 2022, the COP27, which was held in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. Moreover, Egypt has recently invested in a number of healthcare and development projects in a number of African nations.
Welcome back, and indeed, we share the same destiny, we share the same future. We shared the past, and we have lots and lots of challenges to face this upcoming stage. Let me here get back to our main topic, and let me here welcome our very dear and distinguished guest, Ambassador Mohamed Shazly, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you so much for being with us.
The pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. We start with this vision that Egypt has put for Africa. Egypt has put Africa in the forefront of its priority files, particularly at the very past years, or very few past years. Definitely, Egypt and Africa enjoy long of historic relations, but
Egypt is Africa, and Africa is Egypt. We are part of Africa.
One land, right?
We are a part and a very special part of Africa. In the 1950s and the 1960s, Egypt spearheaded the struggle for African independence from colonialism. And after the independence, the newly independent African countries were very fragile economically. The help by Egyptian experts, technicians, was pivotal to the consolidating the independence of the African countries. Egypt was one of the initiatives of the Organization of African Unity, which is today the African Union. So, I mean, we have a long history and we have deep roots in Africa. And it is reciprocal. If you remember, after the 1967 war, all the African countries unanimously, they severed relations with Israel. They stood behind Egypt and the Arab countries in their struggle to regain the occupied lands. Egypt was also pivotal and instrumental in the downfall of the racist regimes in South Africa and in Namibia. So Egypt has a very glorious history and very deep roots with Africa, simply because we are part of Africa. We are Africans.
But for sometimes it was very much neglected for a long time.
That was a tragic mistake.
We came back.
And we came back, and we came
Indeed.
back very strongly.
So here we have to speak about three important issues or three important files in Africa that we have really worked on, particularly the past years: peace and security of the continent, the health, and definitely the coronavirus and the climate change and all these issues, the inter-trade or the economic file. Three important files that Egypt has worked on even before it assumed the presidency of the African Union.
These are three pillars of the Egyptian relations with Africa. Peace in the continent. Egypt is the primary contributor of peacekeepers in the struggles in Africa, either under the flag of the African Union or the flag of the United Nations. We have played a very important role in peacekeeping in Africa. When Egypt also was heading the African Union, we had a very important initiative, which is the Africa Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Development. This is, I think, was a very important initiative by Egypt, because Africa has been devastated by conflict. Look what has happened in Darfur and in Sudan. Look at what has happened in Angola. Angola has been really one of the, I think it is only second to Egypt with the amount of landmines that have been planted in the country. This has completely stopped agricultural production. The farmer does not want to step on the land for fear of landmines. The amount of destruction in Liberia was also phenomenal. What is happening now in Libya? What is happening in Somalia? So the reconstruction and development after the conflict, first of all, it consolidates the peace. Because if you keep the debris after the conflict, nobody has an interest in preserving the peace. In fact, there are some factions that profit. There are youngsters who are recruited to fight, and their only expertise is in killing and destroying. So if you give these people a chance to build and to develop and to consolidate peace, this makes a very big difference on the ground.
Right.
Another very important development was the establishment of the African Center for Disease Control and Protection. This was first introduced in the African Summit in Abuja in 2013. It was mainly headed against the HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. Health in Africa is one of the major challenges, and disease is the main impediment to development. Let me tell you some statistics. In 2021, there were 247 million cases of malaria worldwide, and 619,000 deaths of malaria. 95% of the malaria cases in the whole world was in Africa, and 96% of the deaths of malaria were also in Africa. Also, there are other diseases that are prevalent in Africa, and therefore I think that combating disease is one of the major challenges in Africa. And I think also this is one of the areas where Egypt has something very valuable to offer. We have an experience. We have eradicated bilharzia in Egypt after a very thorough and strong campaign. We have almost also eradicated the virus C, and we have performed a very exemplary role against the COVID epidemic.
19, yes.
So we have,
corona, yes.
we have something to offer. Our expertise in this area is something needed very much in Africa, and I think something that Egypt is willing to put forward. Another also, I think, very important development that is happening in Africa is we are now studying very thoroughly the project of the Cairo-Cape Town road and the Cairo-Dakar road, which for the first time will offer a north-south road in Africa and an east-west road. Africa is the only continent that has no transcontinental roads, either north-south or east-west. So I think this is going to boost relations between the African countries and will be a very strong pillar for African cooperation.
Actually, this was a part and parcel of the big vision for Africa's sustainable development vision. Egypt has put its 2030 vision, and that goes in parallel with the UN SDGs, but also the African Sustainable Development Vision for 2063.
Indeed, and let me also add another thing before we move, and that is what happened in the Sharm el-Sheikh
COP27.
COP27.
Indeed.
And for the first time, we, through our pressure, we have convinced the industrial countries to form a fund to recompensate the African countries for the climate change and for the climate deterioration, that Africa is one of the regions that has been very much adversely affected.
Very much indeed. The COP27 was a real
step forward.
But it's a step forward for the common African work, of course.
Indeed.
But it was a real evidence of how Egypt is truly taking the brunt of speaking on behalf of the African continent. If we speak about the role of Egypt, or the role Egypt has been playing in several issues, then we have to speak about how Egypt has always stressed the importance of integration among the African countries. Where has Egypt played in that its pivotal role?
Well, I thank you for reminding me of this, because this is also a very important issue. Also, during Egypt's presidency of the African Union, we have introduced the African Continental Free Trade Area. Africa has been divided by several semi-continental, the SADC, the COMESA, the ECOWAS. So for the first time now, we have put forward a plan for integrating the whole African continent into a unit, a unified unit, which will boost first of all, the presence of Africa, is, as we have seen lately, Africa is demonstrating its importance. In the past few years, we have had an African-American summit, an African-European summit, an African-Chinese summit, an African-Russian summit. So this shows...
And the African-US summit that just took place...
And the
latest one?
US summit.
For the very first time, and I just need to pinpoint our finger on something. But
this shows that the whole world is looking at Africa and giving a very strong importance and priority to Africa. Africa is one of the richest areas in the world in resources. Look at the copper, the oil. You have Libya, you have Algeria, and you have Nigeria. 3 major OPEC members are African. You have the agricultural potential and the food production, which is coming into focus nowadays after the Crimean crisis. Sudan alone has 200 million acres of arable land. Sudan can feed the whole Arab world and even
the whole world, actually.
Produce
it's the basket
to Europe.
Food. Yes.
You have the potential of electricity, whether hydroelectrical. There are, plans for hydroelectrical projects on the Congo River, and you have also the solar energy, where there have been projects of putting solar panels all over North Africa that will produce enough energy for Africa and to export to Southern Europe. So you have, the potential.
The manpower.
The manpower, everything.
resources,
So
enormous
if you
resources.
concentrate on the African development, the sky is the limit.
The secret word is integration, not competition. That could be the...
Listen, I mean, you cannot rule out competition. Competition can be beneficial to progress. There is a difference between competition and conflict.
Indeed.
If you
Indeed.
keep competition within civilized limits, it becomes a plus for progress, not an impediment.
And that's what we need.
Yes.
But also the Arab countries, they have, we have to have a big role in Africa, since part of the Arab world is inside Africa. Before we move on with our discussion here, let's take this report. And Abu Dhabi Summit, Arab leaders emphasized joint work to tackle regional challenges. That was an important meeting that gathered together President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the leaders of the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman, and highlighted the importance of joint Arab work. Let's watch.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and leaders of the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Bahrain, Qatar and Oman highlighted the importance of enhancing joint Arab work to tackle the region's political, security and economic challenges. The Arab leaders made their remarks on Wednesday during a summit in Abu Dhabi under the title Prosperity and Stability in the Region. El-Sisi, United Arab Emirates President Mohamed bin Zayed, Jordan's King Abdullah II, Oman's Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, Bahrain's King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, and Qatar's Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani partook in the meeting. During the summit, the leaders said Arab cooperation and building developmental and economic partnerships is the main entry for achieving development and creating a better future for the Arab peoples. They also stressed the importance of adhering to the rules of good neighborhood and respect of the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of the countries of the region. The leaders also discussed a number of regional and international issues and developments of mutual concern, as well as the political, security and economic challenges in the region. The summit aimed at consolidating and deepening cooperation between the 6 countries in the fields that serve development, prosperity and stability in the region through further joint work, cooperation and regional integration. The meeting came a day after a summit that brought together El-Sisi and King Abdullah of Jordan with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Cairo. The leaders of Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and Jordan have intensified meetings over the past year to discuss cooperation and economic integration amid the ongoing global challenges. The 3 countries, together with Bahrain, are also bound by an industrial partnership initiative concerned with implementing joint multi-billion investments in many key sectors. The summit also came amid failure to revive the nuclear deal with Iran, which would help curb Iran's nuclear ambitions. In a tweet this week, Bahrain's king warned of a possible Israeli attack against Iranian targets that may destabilize the region in the event of failure to revive the nuclear deal. The Abu Dhabi summit also comes amid Israeli escalation in the West Bank under the new extreme right government of Benjamin Netanyahu and proposed Israeli annexation of the Jordan Valley, a step that will certainly draw Arab and international rejection.
Right, welcome back, and back to you, Ambassador Shazly. And we were speaking about Africa. We're also addressing how the Arab world should be existing, particularly in the African continent. Part of the Arab world is already in Africa. And I have to say here that multilateral partnerships with Africa to address global challenges is
Let me
existing already.
first tell you that the Arabs and the Africans, they complement one another. As you have said, that part of Africa is Arab. And then if you look at, for instance, at food security, one of the weakest links in the national security of the Arabs is food security. If you look at, for instance, the Gulf countries, they import most of their food. As I said before, that you have the potential for food production in Africa is very high. And then you have the expertise of the Arabs in building. If you look at the Gulf countries, the achievements that have built in urbanization and in roads and in infrastructure, and also what is going on in Egypt, this is something that is highly needed in Africa.
Your Excellency, you said here before the report, you spoke about a number of summits that took place: the Russian Africa Summit, the Chinese Africa Summit, the US Africa Summit, and all those summits. In fact, Africa is put as a center stage of focus for all the whole world. Here came the importance of an Arab existence and an African existence, particularly towards confronting challenges. Yes, indeed, the Arab world is complementary to the African continent, and it should be one. But how do you view the existence of the Arab world in Africa?
As I said, you know, Africa is a very rich continent, and the competition for Africa is very intense. You have the Chinese are competing, the Indians are competing, the Europeans are competing, the Americans are competing, the Turks, the Iranians.
Everyone.
Everyone is competing for the riches of Africa. In order to have a win-win situation, the Africans vis-a-vis the world, the wider the base, the stronger the superstructure is. So the problem in Africa is, as we have been talking about competition and conflict, Africa has been divided for a very long time. We need to solidify African Union, and we need to solidify African Union with the Arabs, because I think both are targeted by very strong powers. So we need to have a strong front in order to, we are talking now about superpowers. We're talking about China with the road, and we're talking about the United States, we're talking about Russia. These are superpowers. You cannot meet the challenge with these superpowers individually. If we do not consolidate our unity, we will not get the best deal we can get.
The last US Africa Summit, Egypt was of course, attending, and there were many vows and many promises by the U.S., but we have always heard about promises. To which extent do we need to strengthen partnerships with with the whole world, with all the world partners, but on the partnership or under the slogan of partnership?
I am a diplomat. My job, my creed was diplomacy. And when your creed is diplomacy, you learn that the more cooperation you have with the world, the better the deal you get. If you cannot isolate yourself from the world, the more contacts, the more relations you have, the better deal you get. If the world feels that you are a valuable partner and that many other parties are willing to cooperate with you, you have spoken about the African-US summit. This is
I just answered this because that is, I guess, the second summit that takes place between the US and Africa since 2004, and it seems like Africa was not very much into considerations, or we heard lots and lots of US promises before, but they were never fulfilled.
That is why I want to comment on this. The United States has been very late in giving its hand to Africa. When they realize that the Chinese are very active and are ready to cooperate with Africa, the Europeans are very active, the Russians are active, the Turks are active, the Iranians are active, they realize that if they do not move, they are going to lose.
Even Europe is, in a way or another, active.
The point is not to make a contact. The point is to follow up and not to receive promises. You know, I give also the example of promises in the Arab world. In the First World War, the British, they had correspondence, Al-Hussein McMahon correspondence, promising Al-Sharif Hussein a united Arab kingdom. At the same time, they were negotiating with the Jews for the
their independent or their state. Their state.
Promise to give them a homeland. Completely contradictory. The Jews and the Jewish agency, they followed the promise, and the Arabs, we took a promise, and then you said, okay, you're not fulfilling your promise, we are not happy, and that's what we did. So it is not, we're not happy, no. We are ready to struggle, we are ready to get what we have been promised. This is the most important thing.
Yes, we are. And we need to integrate.
We do.
Indeed. Your Excellency, Ambassador Mohamed Shazly, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for being with us and, as usual, for your great input. But my time is out and I have to end it here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Next debate would be on Sunday. Good night.